The Barrett M82's recoil slammed into Elena Thornton's shoulder like a sledgehammer wrapped in velvet. Controlled violence, predicted pain. The rifle's report echoed across the Virginia mountains, a sound that could wake the dead or create them. Through her scope, at an impossible 1,100 yards, she watched the steel target ring like a church bell struck by an angry god. Dead center. Elena didn't smile. Smiling was for amateurs who thought hitting targets meant something. She'd been making shots like this since she was 14, alone at a private range 40 miles outside Alexandria, teaching herself what her father never got the chance to finish teaching her. The workshop smelled like gun oil and metal shavings and 20 years of grief she'd learned to wear like a second skin. At 27, Elena Thornton had perfected the art of being overlooked. Standing 5'3" in her work boots, wearing coveralls 2 sizes too large that hid her frame, she moved through the Marine Corps base at Quantico like a ghost. The Marines who brought their rifles for calibration saw a pretty face, brown hair pulled back, green eyes that seemed too soft for this world, and dismissed the mind behind it. They called her Barbie with a Barrett. When they thought she couldn't hear, she heard everything. Elena ran her fingers along the barrel of an M40A3 sniper rifle, checking for imperfections with the precision of a surgeon examining a patient. The morning sun cut through the workshop's single window, illuminating dust particles that danced like stars in her private universe. Perfect bore, she murmured to herself, peering through the barrel toward the light. Zero throat erosion. This rifle's been babied. The door burst open without warning. Elena's hand moved instinctively toward the Sig Sauer P226 she kept hidden beneath her workbench, a habit from a life she pretended not to have. But she recognized the silhouette immediately. Colonel Frank Mitchell filled the doorway like a monument to a war that never ended. At 68, his shoulders still carried the weight of command, though he'd officially retired from the Marine Corps 5 years ago. His silver hair was military short, his blue eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Elena," he said, not a greeting, a statement. She straightened, wiping her hands on a rag that had seen cleaner days. "Colonel, you don't usually visit my workshop. This isn't a social call." Mitchell stepped inside, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. The click of the latch sounded final, like a coffin lid. "I need you," he said simply. Elena felt her stomach tighten. She'd known this moment would come eventually, had dreaded it, had somehow longed for it in the darkest hours of sleepless nights when the past refused to stay buried. "I'm an equipment tech," she said carefully. "I fix rifles. I don't use them." "Stop," Mitchell's voice cut like a blade through her deflection. He took 3 steps forward, close enough now that she could see the lines age and combat had carved into his face. "I've known you since you were 7 years old," he continued, softer now but no less intense. "Since your father—" "Don't." The word came out sharper than she intended. Elena took a breath, forced her voice level. "My father died 20 years ago. That doesn't make me him." Mitchell pulled a tablet from his jacket with the careful movements of someone handling evidence. He tapped the screen twice and turned it toward her. The image froze her blood. The man on screen stood on a balcony carved into mountainside. Afghan mountains, by the terrain, all rock and snow and elevation that made your lungs burn. He wore traditional robes, dark brown and weathered, but his eyes held a predator's calculation. Late 50s, maybe 60, with a gray beard and a face that had watched too many people die. "Khalid al-Nazari," Mitchell said quietly. "They call him the Wolf. Taliban commander, responsible for 17 attacks on U.S. forces in the last 3 years. 63 American soldiers dead, 38 wounded." Elena stared at the screen. Her throat had gone dry. "Why are you showing me this?" Mitchell's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Because 20 years ago, in November 2004, Nazari planned an ambush in Fallujah, an ambush specifically designed to kill one man." The workshop seemed to tilt. "Your father." Elena gripped the edge of her workbench, knuckles going white. The wood felt real, solid, the only thing keeping her from floating away into a past she'd spent 2 decades trying to forget. James Thornton, Mitchell continued. Gunnery sergeant, scout sniper, the best I ever trained. Nazari knew Ghost was the greatest threat to his network. Knew your father had killed 15 of his commanders in 6 months. So he sacrificed 12 of his own men to set a trap. Mitchell paused, and in that pause, Elena heard everything he wasn't saying. And your father walked into it, she whispered. He knew. Mitchell's voice cracked just slightly. He knew it was a trap, and he went anyway because 40 Marines needed time to retreat. He chose them over himself. The words hung in the air like smoke. He chose them over me, Elena said. Mitchell's eyes softened, the only crack in his armor. No, he chose to give you a world where 40 families stayed intact, where 40 Marines came home. He chose to be the kind of father who taught his daughter what honor looks like, even if the lesson cost him everything. Elena closed her eyes. Her father's face materialized in the darkness behind her eyelids. His gentle smile, his patient hands showing her how to breathe, how to squeeze a trigger between heartbeats, how to read wind in the dance of grass and leaves. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Because Khalid al-Nazari is still alive, still killing American soldiers. Mitchell swiped the screen, showing satellite imagery of a compound nestled in Afghan mountains. And we finally found him. Elena opened her eyes. The compound looked like something from a different century. Mud walls, flat roofs, narrow windows designed for defense. It perched on a mountainside like an eagle's nest. He appears twice a week, Mitchell said, zooming in on a specific balcony. Tuesday and Friday mornings. 14 seconds on that balcony. That's our window. Send a drone strike. Too many civilians. Wrong optics. Intel says he keeps women and children in the compound as human shields. Mitchell looked at her with an intensity that made her want to run. We need precision. We need a sniper. Elena laughed, but the sound held no humor. You have an entire Marine Corps full of snipers. Why? Because our best is injured, because this mission deploys in 72 hours, and because the team lead is someone your father trained. Mitchell set the tablet on her workbench. Commander Ryan Harrison, former SEAL, now military contractor. He was with your father in Fallujah. Ghost saved his life twice. The name hit like a fist. Elena had heard it before, in her father's letters. The ones she'd found after his death, written but never sent. Letters where Ghost spoke of his best student, a young SEAL with instinct that transcended training. What's my role? She asked, though she already knew. Equipment specialist, officially. Mitchell's eyes held hers. Backup sniper, unofficially. Elena, he leaned against the workbench. I've watched you practice at that range. I've known for 5 years what you do every night, what you are. Heat rushed to her face. Anger, shame, something else she couldn't name. You've been following me, protecting you, like I promised Ghost I would. Mitchell straightened. You inherited your father's gift, maybe exceeded it, but you've been hiding, living small, pretending to be less than you are. Elena's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against the cold metal of the bench. Because everyone who knew Ghost expects me to be him, she said, to fill his boots, to carry his legacy. Her voice broke. I can't be him. I'm just Elena. You're wrong. Mitchell picked up the tablet. You're not just Elena. You're the woman who shoots 1 MOA groups at 1,000 yards, who can read wind like your father read books, who has a gift that comes once in a generation. He paused. And you're the only person who can kill the man who murdered Ghost. The workshop fell silent, except for the distant sound of Marines training, their cadence calls drifting through walls like ghosts of wars past and wars to come. Elena looked at her hands, mechanic's hands, scarred from metal edges and hot rifle barrels, but steady, always steady. When do we leave? The conference room smelled like stale coffee and testosterone, and the particular kind of tension that comes before men commit violence in the name of something they tell themselves is righteous. 5 men sat around a table covered with satellite imagery, weapon specifications, and mission parameters. Elena stood in the doorway, still wearing her coveralls, feeling every eye turned toward her like searchlights. The man at the head of the table stood slowly. Commander Ryan Harrison looked exactly like his photographs. 6'1", gray hair cut military short, a scar tracing his left cheekbone like frozen lightning. 62 years old and built like he could still ruck 20 miles with a full combat load. His eyes, pale blue and hard as winter ice, assessed her in 3 seconds flat. "Frank," Harrison said, not looking at Mitchell, "I asked for a sniper." "This is Elena Thornton." Harrison's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Pain, definitely. "James Thornton's daughter." "Yes. I respected Ghost more than any man I've served with." Harrison's voice softened, just fractionally. "He saved my life twice. I owe him everything." He paused. "But respect doesn't win firefights. Experience does. She's a tech. This is Tier 1 work." Elena felt the familiar burn of dismissal, that special kind of erasure reserved for women in men's spaces. She stayed silent, watching, cataloging weaknesses. Harrison favored his left leg slightly. Old injury. He touched the scar on his cheek when he was thinking, and his eyes kept flicking to the mission parameters like they contained secrets. The other 4 men studied her with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Garrett Thompson, bull, had massive shoulders and a barrel chest, Texas Rangers cap, contempt worn like a second skin. Heavy weapons specialist, 60 years old. William Morrison sat apart, lean and watchful. British accent, former SAS, 58, the team medic. He sipped coffee and said nothing. Wyatt Sullivan looked efficient, pragmatic. 47, former Navy, the communications specialist. Dalton Hayes sat furthest from the others, Bible open beside mission documents. The primary sniper, 52, graybeard, 1,000-yard stare. They called him Preacher. "Gentlemen," Harrison said, "mission brief. Target, Khalid al-Nazari, compound in Hindu Kush Mountains, eastern Afghanistan. Distance from optimal shooting position, 3,247 meters." The number hung in the air like a challenge. Target appears Tuesday and Friday mornings, 0600 local time. 14 seconds maximum exposure. Harrison tapped the satellite image. "Preacher is primary shooter. Miss Thornton is..." "Elena," she said quietly. Harrison looked at her. "Excuse me?" "My name is Elena, not Miss Thornton, and if I'm on this team, use my name." The room went silent. Bull snorted. Doc raised one eyebrow. Wyatt typed something on his laptop. Preacher's eyes narrowed. Harrison stared at her for 5 long seconds. Elena held his gaze, refusing to blink, refusing to back down. "Elena will provide equipment support," Harrison said finally, "and function as backup if needed." "Backup?" Preacher's voice carried the soft drawl of Kentucky hills. "Sir, with respect, 3,000-meter shots aren't something you learn in a workshop." "Agreed," Harrison said, "which is why she'll qualify before we deploy." He turned to Elena. "You want on my team? Prove it. Tomorrow, 0900. Range 400. Standard Marine qualification. 1,000 yards, 10 shots. Pass is 7 out of 10. Your requirement is 10 out of 10. Elena met his eyes. "Fair enough." "Perfect score," Bull muttered. "She'll fold like wet cardboard." Elena smiled, a small, cold expression that made her look exactly like her father's photographs. "We'll see," she said. Dawn came to Virginia like a reluctant promise. Cold, gray, The kind of morning that made you question decisions made in warm offices far from consequences. Elena arrived 30 minutes early. She'd barely slept, spending most of the night in her apartment disassembling and reassembling her father's rifle. A ritual she'd performed 1,000 times, muscle memory and meditation combined. The range stretched before her like Judgment Day. 1,000 yards of Virginia soil, autumn grass gone brown from early frost. The distant target was barely visible without magnification. Harrison's team assembled like pallbearers at a funeral. They brought coffee and thermoses, skepticism in their postures. Mitchell stood apart, saying nothing. 8 Marine instructors gathered as well. Word had spread. The daughter of Ghost Thornton was attempting qualification. Harrison checked his watch. "You're early." "Habit," Elena said. She opened her rifle case slowly, deliberately. Inside, the Barrett M82A1 gleamed like a surgical instrument. Standard issue, not her father's rifle. That stayed home, too sacred for this particular kind of proving. She assembled the rifle with economical movements: stock, barrel, scope, magazine. Each click and snap precise, no wasted motion. The weather briefed itself. 18-mile-per-hour crosswind from 3 o'clock. Temperature 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold bore, the barrel hadn't been warmed by previous shots, which meant her first round would fly differently from the rest. Bull lit a cigarette. "Money says she doesn't make it past shot 3. "I'll take that action," Doc said quietly. 20 says she makes 7. 50 says she makes all 10, Mitchell announced. Everyone turned to stare at him. "That's a sucker bet, Colonel," Preacher said. "Then take it." Preacher didn't. Elena settled into position, prone, bipod legs extended and firm against packed earth. Left hand supporting the stock, right hand feather light on the grip, finger outside the trigger guard until ready. The rifle weighed 30 pounds. The moment weighed more. She pressed her eye to the scope. The world narrowed to crosshairs and target, wind and mathematics, breathing and patience. Everything else fell away. The watching men, her father's ghost, the weight of expectation. Her father's voice echoed in memory. "Feel the wind, Elena. Don't calculate it. Feel it." She closed her eyes, listened to the grass whisper secrets, felt the cold air kiss her cheek from the right. Consistent, steady, no gusts yet. 18 miles per hour meant she needed to adjust 4.2 minutes of angle right. Temperature correction, 0.8 MOA. Total adjustment, 3.4 MOA right. Elena's hands moved with the autonomy of long practice, adjusting the scope's windage knob. Click, click, click. 13 clicks right, 3 clicks down for cold bore. She opened her eyes, settled her breathing. 4-count inhale, 4-count exhale. Heart rate dropping from 68 to 56 beats per minute. The rifle became an extension of her body. The target sat 1,000 yards downrange, 10-inch X-ring at the center. Hit that, you were a shooter. Hit it 10 times, you were a sniper. Elena inhaled half, exhaled, squeezed the trigger between heartbeats. The Barrett roared, 50 caliber fury. The recoil slammed into her shoulder like divine retribution. But she rode it, stayed on target through the scope, watching. 3 seconds later, the time it took the bullet to fly 1,000 yards, the target shuddered. X-ring, one of the Marine instructors called through binoculars. Dead center. Bull dropped his cigarette. "Lucky shot," he muttered. Elena didn't respond. She chambered the next round, the bolt action smooth as silk, and settled back into position. Same wind, same calculations, same cold, mechanical process that transformed thought into death at distance. Shot 2, X-ring. Shot 3, X-ring. Shot 4, X-ring. By shot 7, the Marines had stopped talking. The only sounds were wind through grass, the Barrett's periodic thunder, and the distant ting of bullets punching paper. Elena fired shot 8, then 9, each report identical, each impact devastating. She chambered the 10th round, settling into the rifle one last time. "Moving target!" Harrison's shout cracked across the range like a whip. Before Elena could process, the downrange target began tracking left to right, pulled by cables she hadn't known existed. 3 miles per hour lateral movement, not part of standard qualification, not fair. Every instinct screamed, protest. This wasn't the test. This was sabotage. But Elena's hands didn't listen to instinct. They listened to training. To thousands of hours at that private range, shooting in conditions her father had deliberately made impossible. When conditions are perfect, Ghost had written in one of his letters, you're not training, you're just confirming what you already know. Elena tracked the target through her scope, calculated lead time. At 1,000 yards, a target moving 3 miles per hour needed 14 inches of lead to compensate for both target movement and bullet flight time. She shifted aim, led the target, breathing controlled, heart rate steady, squeezed. The Barrett spoke its final judgment. 4 seconds of flight time felt like years. The bullet intercepted the target mid-movement, punching through the X-ring like destiny had always known exactly where that piece of copper-jacketed lead would end up. Hit. The Marine instructor's voice carried something that might have been awe. Dead center, moving target. Elena safed the rifle and stood slowly. Her shoulder would bruise. 10 .50 caliber rounds in rapid succession guaranteed that. But the pain felt distant, unimportant. She turned to face Harrison and his team. No one spoke. Harrison walked forward, boots crunching on gravel. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could see every line combat had carved into his face. He looked at the Barrett in her hands. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral, but the words were barbed wire wrapped in velvet. "That's quite a toy for a technician." The words hung in the cold morning air, dismissive and sharp and designed to cut. Elena felt something ignite in her chest. Not anger, something colder, more precise. She looked up at him, 6 inches of height difference that suddenly meant nothing at all, and her voice came out level, hard, absolutely calm. "You think that's a toy?" She didn't blink, didn't look away. "That's a Barrett 50 caliber. This rifle has more confirmed kills at extreme range than most snipers accumulate in entire careers. It's killed enemy combatants from distances you've never even attempted." She took 1 step closer, close enough to see his pupils dilate. "And I'm not a technician, Commander." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I'm James Thornton's daughter, sir." The range fell into silence so complete that Elena could hear her own heartbeat, still steady at 56 BPM. Harrison stared at her. The calculation happening behind his eyes was almost visible. Reassessment, recognition, something that might have been respect fighting something that definitely was prejudice. Mitchell's voice broke the moment. "Any other questions, Ryan?" Harrison's jaw tightened. He looked at Elena for 5 more seconds, 5 eternal seconds where the future hung in balance, then stepped back. "Gear up," he said flatly. "Wheels up 0600 tomorrow. Welcome to the team." He turned and walked away. His men followed like iron filings pulled by a magnet. Doc paused beside Elena. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen in 30 years. He smiled slightly. "I'm hoping for brave." Elena watched them go, adrenaline finally beginning to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Her hands started to shake, delayed reaction, body finally processing what her mind had held at bay. Mitchell approached quietly. "Your father would have been proud." "Would he?" Elena's voice cracked. "I don't even know if this is what I want or just what everyone expects. Maybe both, maybe neither." Mitchell looked toward the target 1,000 yards away, where 10 bullets had written their verdict. "But you're going. Not for Ghost. Not for you." Elena looked at the Barrett in her hands. "For me." Mitchell squeezed her shoulder gently. Trust your training. Trust yourself. That night, Elena packed in her small Alexandria apartment. The ritual felt ceremonial, religious in its precision. Clothing designed for mountain cold, medical supplies, protein bars that tasted like cardboard but kept you alive, extra socks. Her father had been fanatical about dry socks. And then, from the back of her closet, she pulled out the hard case. The rifle inside wasn't standard issue. Custom Macmillan TAC-50, bolt action, 50 BMG, 42 pounds of precision engineering, dark metal, worn stock, the weight of history, her father's rifle. The stock was worn where his cheek had pressed against it 10,000 times. The barrel showed micro scratches from desert sand and mountain grit. And engraved along the receiver in letters her father had carved himself, Ghost's Legacy for Elena. She ran her fingers over the words, feeling their depth. The metal was cold. The memory was warm. "I don't know if I can do this, Dad," she whispered to the empty apartment. "I don't know if I'm enough." The rifle, of course, said nothing. But somewhere in her chest, in the place where memory lives stronger than reason, Elena heard her father's voice, patient and proud. "You're more than enough, baby girl. You always have been." She closed the case gently, like tucking a child into bed. Tomorrow she would board a C-17 transport headed for war. Tomorrow she would face men who doubted her, a mission that might kill her, and a target who'd murdered the man who taught her everything that mattered. Tomorrow, Elena Thornton would stop hiding. Tonight, she allowed herself one last moment of being small, of being scared, of being just a 27-year-old woman who missed her father and wished the world was different. Then she locked that feeling away in the same place she kept her fear and her doubt, stood up and started loading magazines. The C-17 Globemaster's engines screamed their metal prayer to physics and thrust. Elena sat in the cargo bay, surrounded by Harrison's team, the rifle case between her knees, heading toward mountains that had broken empires and men in equal measure. Harrison sat across from her, studying mission documents by red overhead light. After 20 minutes, he looked up. "Your father," he said. Not a question, just an opening. Elena waited. Ramadi, 2003, insurgent ambush on convoy. Ghost made a shot at 1,400 meters. 4 tangos, 6 seconds. Saved 40 Marines. Harrison's voice carried something Elena hadn't heard before. Reverence wrapped in grief. "I was one of those Marines." "He never told me combat stories," Elena said quietly. "Only training. Because he wanted you to have a choice. Wanted you to choose this life, not inherit it." Harrison folded the documents. "Why workshop? Why hide what you are?" Elena looked at the rifle case between her knees. "Because being Ghost's daughter is like carrying a monument. Everyone expects greatness, excellence, legacy." She paused. "And I'm just—" "You shot 10 for 10 with a moving target at the end," Harrison interrupted. "In cold bore conditions. You're exceptional. Or lucky. Luck is what you call skill when you don't want to take credit for it." He leaned forward. "Out there in Afghanistan, there's no room for hiding. People die when warriors pretend to be something less. And if I'm not good enough, then you would have missed." Harrison's eyes held hers. "You didn't. Ghost trained you. I can see his methods in your shooting. But there's something else, something yours. That's what makes you dangerous." The cargo bay shuddered through turbulence. Elena felt her stomach drop, then settle. "Tell me about Fallujah," she said quietly. Harrison went still. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. How he died, what he said, why he walked into that trap." Harrison was silent for 30 seconds. The engines filled the space where words should be. "We knew something was wrong," he finally said. "Intel was too perfect, set up too convenient. Ghost said it was bait." He looked away. "I wanted to abort. But 40 Marines were pinned down 2 clicks away. They needed covering fire, needed time to retreat. So Dad volunteered. No. Harrison's voice was rough. He ordered me to stay, said it had to be him because he was the best shot, most experience, best chance of success. He paused. His last words to me were, "Tell Elena I'm sorry. Tell her to be better than me, not just like me." Elena felt tears threaten, but refused them. "Not here, not now." "I've carried that message for 20 years, Harrison said. Didn't know how to deliver it. Didn't know if you knew what you were." He shook his head. "But watching you shoot yesterday, you're already better. You just don't know it yet." The C-17 began its descent toward Bagram Airfield. Elena felt the pressure change in her ears, the shift from journey to arrival. "Ryan," she said, "when we're in position, if the shot comes to me instead of Preacher, will you trust me?" Harrison looked at her for a long time. The red light made shadows dance across his face. "Ask me again when we're on target," he said, which wasn't yes, but it wasn't no either. The plane touched down hard, tires screaming against runway, and Elena Thornton arrived in Afghanistan carrying her father's rifle and a legacy she'd spent 20 years running from. But running, she was beginning to understand, only worked until the moment you turned around and faced what was chasing you. And Elena was done running. Elena's lungs burned with every breath at 8,000 feet. The air was thin, hostile, each inhalation like swallowing razor blades wrapped in ice. 6 hours of climbing, 107 pounds across her back, terrain that killed the careless and broke the strong. Bull Thompson set the pace ahead of her, fast, aggressive, deliberately punishing, testing her, waiting for her to fail. She kept up. The Hindu Kush mountains rose around them like the teeth of some ancient god, jagged, unforgiving, eternal. Reading about these peaks in mission briefs hadn't prepared Elena for the reality. The cold that bit through tactical gear and found bone. The vastness that made humans feel like insects. The silence broken only by wind in breathing and the crunch of boots on stone. Firebase Phoenix clung to the mountainside like a barnacle to a ship's hull, desperate, stubborn, refusing to be dislodged. As the Chinook's ramp lowered, Elena stepped into cold that bit through her tactical gear and found her bones. -5 degrees Celsius, wind at 12 miles per hour, gusting to 18, the kind of cold that made metal stick to skin, that turned breath to ice crystals, that killed careless soldiers in their sleep. "Welcome to Hell's waiting room," Bull said, shouldering his pack. "Temperature drops another 10 degrees after sunset. Better check that fancy rifle, sweetheart." Elena said nothing. She'd already done the calculations. At this altitude and temperature, her bullet's ballistic coefficient would change. Less air resistance meant flatter trajectory, but also more wind drift. The cold would affect powder burn rate, reducing muzzle velocity by approximately 30 feet per second. These were the kinds of details that separated good snipers from dead ones. The Firebase commander was a Marine captain who looked 12 years old and exhausted beyond his years. He briefed them in a plywood hut that smelled like diesel fuel and desperation. "Target compound is here," he tapped a satellite image. 8 clicks northwest, elevation 9,200 feet. Intel confirms Nazari maintains residence. Appears on eastern balcony Tuesday and Friday mornings. 0600 local. Approximately 14 seconds. Approximately, Preacher Hayes leaned forward. 12 to 16 seconds. Variable. Correct. Security? Harrison asked. 30 to 40 fighters. Patrols every 4 hours like clockwork. Your infiltration window is 2200 tonight. Next patrol isn't until 0200 tomorrow. Elena studied the compound through the grainy satellite resolution. 3 buildings arranged in a U-shape, mud walls, flat roofs. The eastern balcony jutted from the main structure like an afterthought, maybe 6 feet wide, 30 feet above ground level. Anyone standing there for 14 seconds was either stupid or confident. Nazari wasn't stupid. Optimal shooting position, Harrison continued, finger landing on a ridge designated Echo 7. Range from target balcony, 3,247 meters. The numbers sat in the room like a third rail. Elena's mind converted instantly. 2 miles plus another 135 feet. The kind of distance where bullets fell more than they flew, where wind became your enemy or ally, where the curvature of the earth started to matter. Wind conditions? Preacher asked. Variable, 8 to 15 miles per hour. Direction shifts with thermal currents, which meant nearly impossible. Harrison looked at his team. Questions? Just one, Elena said quietly. Everyone turned. Has anyone actually confirmed Nazari appears exactly at 0600, or is that an average of observed appearances? The young captain blinked. Intel report says 0600. That's not what I asked. Silence stretched. The captain shuffled papers, found a different document. Observations over 6 months. Appearances range from 0553 to 0607. So we have a 14-minute window where he might appear for 14 seconds, Elena said, looking at Harrison. That changes timing calculations for security avoidance. Harrison's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. Recognition, maybe, or reassessment. Good catch, he said. We adjust patrol timing based on 0550 window. They departed Firebase Phoenix at 2200 hours under a moonless sky. The Hindu Kush swallowed them like Jonah into the whale. Dark, absolute, transformative. Elena carried 107 pounds, 65-pound ruck, 42-pound Macmillan TAC 50. Her own body weight was 118 pounds. She was carrying 91% of her body weight across 18 kilometers of mountain terrain, climbing 600 meters in elevation, in temperatures that would kill exposed skin in minutes. Bull set the pace, fast, aggressive, testing. Elena understood the game. Prove you can't keep up. Prove you don't belong. She'd seen this dance before, so she kept pace. Controlled her breathing. 4 counts in through the nose, 6 counts out through the mouth. Heart rate steady at 122 beats per minute, high but sustainable. The mountains unfolded in shades of darkness, rock and scree and patches of snow that glowed faintly in starlight. The team moved in tactical column, 30 feet between each operator, weapons ready, eyes scanning. Doc dropped back beside Elena after the first hour. You holding up? Yes. That pack is heavy. I know. You're doing fine, he said, and there was something in his voice that might have been respect. He studied her for a moment, then nodded and moved forward again. At 0315 hours, they were 8 kilometers from Firebase Phoenix and 8 kilometers from target compound. Halfway. In the valley between destinations, where soldiers were most vulnerable. Wyatt, walking point, stopped suddenly. His fist went up, the universal military signal for freeze. Everyone stopped. Elena's hand moved to her M4 carbine, selector switch from safe to semi with a click that sounded too loud. Wyatt knelt, examining the trail. His hand moved slowly, carefully. Then he looked back at Harrison, and even in the darkness, Elena could see the fear in his eyes. Wire, Wyatt whispered. The word hit like electricity. Elena's training kicked in before thought. She froze completely, not even breathing, every muscle locked. IED, improvised explosive device. The Hindu Kush was littered with them, left over from Soviet occupation, from Taliban resistance, from decades of war. Nobody move, Harrison's voice carried absolute authority. Wyatt, can you trace it? Wyatt pulled out a red lens flashlight. He swept the beam slowly across the trail. The thin wire glinted like a spider's web in the red light, stretched across the path at ankle height. Trace goes that way. Wyatt pointed right, into rocks. I can't see the device without... The world exploded. Elena never knew what triggered it. The blast picked her up and threw her backward like a child's toy. She flew through air, no control, no orientation, just force and momentum, and the certainty that this was how she would die. She hit rock hard. Her helmet cracked against stone and stars bloomed behind her eyes. Constellations of pain. The ringing in her ears drowned out everything. No sound, just a high-pitched whine, like the universe screaming. Elena lay still, running checks. Fingers moved. Toes moved. Legs responded. Arms functioned. She tasted copper, blood from a split lip or bitten tongue. She rolled onto her hands and knees, shaking her head to clear it. The world swam, then slowly stabilized. The blast site was a crater, smoke and dust still rising. The team was scattered, dark shapes on the ground, some moving, some terrifyingly still. "Report," Harrison's voice cut through the ringing. "Sound off. Doc, operational." The medic was already moving. "Bull, good." The big Texan stood, limping but mobile. Wyatt, concussed but functional. Elena, she tried to speak, coughed, tried again. "Operational." "Preacher." Silence. Doc reached him first. Elena saw the medic's body language change, the sudden urgency, the quick movements of someone racing against clock and biology. She struggled to her feet, ignoring the protest from bruised ribs, and moved toward them. Preacher lay on his side, right arm bent at an unnatural angle. Blood covered the right side of his face. His breathing was shallow, rapid, the sound of lungs struggling. "Shrapnel to shoulder and face," Doc reported, hands already working. Pressure bandages appearing like magic. "Right eye damaged, possible skull fracture. He needs medevac now." Harrison was already on the radio. "Phoenix Actual, this is Hunter 7. IED strike. 1 urgent surgical. Request immediate dust off." Static. Then, "Hunter 7, Phoenix Actual. Negative on dust off. Weather system moving in. Bird can't fly in these conditions. What's your ETA for medevac?" 48 hours minimum." 48 hours? "I'm aware, Hunter 7. I'm sorry. You're on your own." Harrison stared at the radio like he could will it to give different answers. Then he looked at his team, at Preacher, bleeding and broken. At the target compound 8 kilometers away. At the mission window, closing with every second. "Sir," Doc said quietly, "I can stabilize him, but he can't shoot. 0 depth perception. Shoulders destroyed." "Can he survive 48 hours? "If we keep him warm. If the wound doesn't get infected. If he doesn't go into shock." Doc's tone made clear those were all very big ifs. "But he's combat ineffective." Harrison looked at the sky, at the stars that had watched empires rise and fall in these mountains. "We abort," he said finally. "Get Preacher back to Phoenix." "Sir," Bull stepped forward, "Nazari, if we abort, he goes to ground. We lose him. I'm not sacrificing the mission for one man. We always bring our people home." "With respect, Commander," Wyatt said carefully, "what if there's another option?" Everyone looked at him. Elena. The name hung in the thin mountain air, heavy with implications. Harrison turned to her slowly. In the red glow of chemical light sticks Doc had cracked, his face looked carved from granite. "No." "Sir, she qualified perfect," Bull said. "She's got the skill." "She's got a 1,000-yard qualification," Harrison said flatly. "This is 3,000 meters in mountains with variable wind." "Neither is letting Nazari walk away," Wyatt added. Elena felt every eye on her, weighing, measuring, doubting. She thought of her father walking into an ambush in Fallujah, knowing it was a trap, going anyway because 40 Marines needed him. Legacy wasn't just skill, it was choice. "I can make the shot," Elena said quietly. Harrison stared at her. "You don't know what you're saying." 3,247 meters, Elena interrupted. At 9,200 feet elevation. Temperature approximately -2 Celsius. Wind 8 to 15 miles per hour. Variable direction. Bullet flight time approximately 4.2 seconds. Total drop approximately 341 minutes of angle. She paused, meeting his eyes. I know exactly what I'm saying. Knowing the math isn't the same as making the shot. Then teach me. Elena stepped closer. You have 12 hours before the shoot window. You were Ghost's best student. He trained you. Train me in 12 hours. Her voice didn't waver. My father taught me first. You taught him. Circle completes. The decision played across Harrison's face. Duty versus pragmatism. Protection versus mission. Finally, he nodded. Get Preacher stabilized and bivouacked here. Doc stays with him. Bull and Wyatt provide security. He looked at Elena. You and I continue to ridge position. 12 hours. I'll teach you everything I know. But if you can't make the shot when the time comes, we abort. Clear? Clear. They moved through darkness like ghosts, leaving behind Preacher's shallow breathing and Doc's quiet prayers. The 8 kilometers to ridge position felt longer than the 8 they'd already traveled. Each step weighted with new purpose. Harrison set a slower pace now, stopping frequently to test Elena's knowledge. Wind check. Elena closed her eyes, felt the air on her face. 11 miles per hour from 2 o'clock, steady, no gusts. How do you know no gusts? The sound, gusts whistle. This is smooth flow. Temperature effect on powder burn? Every 10 degrees Celsius change affects muzzle velocity by approximately 4%. We're at -2. Rifle will be cold-soaked. Estimate velocity loss of 30 to 35 feet per second. They climbed. Rock gave way to snow, then back to rock. The Hindu Kush tested every muscle, every joint, every cell that needed oxygen the thin air wouldn't provide. Elena's shoulders screamed. Her legs burned. Her lungs felt like they were lined with broken glass. She kept moving. At 0500 hours, they reached Echo 7 Ridge. The position was perfect. A natural shelf of rock overlooking the valley. The target compound was visible 3,247 meters away, a collection of mud-walled buildings that looked like they'd grown from the mountain itself. Harrison unpacked his ranging equipment, confirmed the distance with laser. 3247 exactly. Elena set up her father's rifle. The Macmillan TAC-50 settled onto its bipod like coming home. She checked the bore, the scope, the trigger pull, everything perfect, everything ready, except her. Talk to me, Harrison said, settling beside her with his spotter scope. What are you feeling? Scared. Good. Fear makes you careful. He adjusted his scope, scanning the compound. Now tell me the shot. Elena looked through her scope. The compound jumped into magnification. 3 buildings, the eastern balcony, the door that would open and reveal her target. Range 3,247. Elevation angle -4.3 degrees. Temperature -2 Celsius. Wind, she paused, feeling, 10 miles per hour. Variable direction, 2 to 3 o'clock. She closed her eyes, the calculations flowing like music. 341 MOA elevation adjustment. Wind call 7.2 MOA right for 10 miles per hour. But if wind shifts to 3 o'clock, I need 8.8. Coriolis effect at this latitude adds 0.8 MOA right. Temperature effect, -1.1 MOA elevation. She opened her eyes. Total adjustments, 340 MOA up, 8.0 MOA right, adjustable if wind changes. Harrison was silent for a moment. You memorized all that. My father taught me to see numbers like colors. This isn't math. It's just knowing. He taught you well, Harrison said softly. Better than he taught me. They waited as the sky shifted from black to gray, that liminal space before dawn when the world held its breath. Elena thought about Preacher 8 kilometers away, bleeding. About her father, dead 20 years. About all the moments in life that came down to single decisions, single shots, single chances. Tell me about Fallujah, she said quietly. What happened after my father died? Harrison adjusted his spotter scope. When he spoke, his voice was rough with memory. We extracted. 40 Marines made it out. 3 didn't, including Ghost. We carried his body 12 kilometers through hostile territory because we don't leave our people behind. Did he suffer? It was fast. He made his shot, took out 4 tangos in 6 seconds. They returned fire. He was hit in the chest. Died in my arms. Harrison's voice went rougher. His last words weren't about the mission. They were about you. Tell Elena I love her, she whispered. Tell her to be better than me. Harrison looked at her. You asked how to be better than a legend. You're already better. You just haven't proven it to yourself yet. At 0530, Wyatt's voice crackled over the radio. Hunter 7, Overwatch, contact. 20+ hostiles. 400 meters north of your position, moving your direction. Harrison grabbed binoculars, scanned the terrain below. Confirmed, security sweep, they're early. ETA to your position? Elena asked. 8 minutes. Target window is 0550 to 0607, she said. I know, Harrison keyed his radio. Bulldog, be advised, we have company inbound. Maintain position and silence. Copy. Harrison looked at Elena. We have a problem. Security sweep arrives at our position in 8 minutes. Target might appear in 20 minutes. We'll be in a firefight when the shot window opens. Or we abort now, Elena said. Or we abort. She looked through her scope at the compound. At the balcony where a man who'd killed her father would stand for 14 seconds. There's a third option, Elena said slowly. Harrison waited. Nazari's running a security sweep early. That means he knows something's wrong. She turned to him. If he's paranoid enough for random sweeps, he's paranoid enough to check the perimeter himself before his scheduled appearance. That's speculation. No, that's psychology. Elena's voice was certain. You don't send security unless you're worried. And if you're worried, you want visual confirmation before you expose yourself. She checked her watch. I think he appears early, not 0600, closer to 0550, maybe even 0545. If you're wrong, we're blown and he escapes. If I'm right, we complete the mission before the sweep reaches us. Elena looked at him. Trust me, trust my father's training. The mountains held their breath. Somewhere below, 20 Taliban fighters moved toward their position. Somewhere in the compound, a man who'd killed Ghost prepared for his day. Harrison keyed his radio. Bulldog, stand by. We're holding position for early target appearance. Say again, sir? We have. I know what we have. Trust Elena's read. Hunter 7 out. He looked at her. If this goes wrong, it won't. You sound like your father. Good, Elena said, and settled into her rifle. Heart rate dropping, breathing slowing, the world narrowing to crosshairs in distance. At 0543 hours, as security forces closed to 600 meters, as the skies shifted from gray to pale blue, the compound door opened. Khalid al-Nazari stepped onto the balcony. He wore traditional Afghan robes, brown and weathered. His gray beard caught the early light. He held binoculars, scanning the mountains. Target, Harrison whispered. Range 3247. Wind 10 miles per hour, 2 o'clock. Steady. You have the shot. Elena's world narrowed. The rifle became her body. The scope became her eye. The bullet waiting in the chamber became her will. She felt the wind on her face. 10 miles per hour. Steady. No gusts yet. Her breathing slowed. 4-count inhale. Hold. 6-count exhale. Heart rate dropped to 52. Nazari turned slightly, presenting his back. Not ideal, but backs worked if the angle was right. Elena settled the crosshair between his shoulder blades, adjusted for wind, for distance, for 20 years of grief. Wind shift, Harrison said. 12 miles per hour now, 3 o'clock. Elena adjusted. 8.8 MOA right instead of 7.2. He's turning, Harrison said, urgent now. About to go back inside. 6 seconds. That's all she had. Elena inhaled. Full breath. Let half out. Held. Found the space between heartbeats where the world went still. Her finger, feather light on the trigger, began to squeeze. Not a pull, a squeeze. Gentle. Inevitable. The Macmillan TAC-50 roared. Recoil slammed into her shoulder. 36 foot-pounds of energy. Elena absorbed it, rode it, stayed on target. The bullet left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second. 50 caliber. 750 grains of copper-jacketed lead. Angry and precise. Flight time, 4.2 seconds. Elena watched through her scope. She could almost see it, a dark streak against pale sky arcing down, dropping, wind pushing it right, gravity pulling it down. Nazari was halfway through the doorway when the bullet arrived. The impact was catastrophic. The 50 caliber round hit between his shoulder blades with 8,000 foot-pounds of energy. His body jerked forward, collapsed, disappeared into the doorway. Gone. Hit, Harrison said, voice tight with awe. Confirmed hit. Target down. Pause. Holy God. 3,247 meters, Elena. That's impossible. The compound exploded into activity. Fighters poured from buildings. Alarms sounded. Security sweep breaking into run, Wyatt reported. They heard the shot. Ite your position 4 minutes. Time to leave, Harrison said, already packing gear. Elena stared through the scope at the doorway where Nazari had fallen, where the man who'd killed her father had breathed his last breath. She thought she'd feel satisfaction. Instead, she felt hollow, empty. Elena, Harrison's hand on her shoulder. We need to move, now. She nodded, packed the rifle with hands that shook slightly, from adrenaline crash, from the enormity of what she'd just done, from the knowledge that she'd crossed a line her father had crossed. They ran. The extraction became a blur of violence. Elena's boots hammered against stone. Her lungs screamed for oxygen the altitude refused to give. Harrison ran beside her, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd spent 40 years learning how to survive. Contact rear, Wyatt's voice crackled. Multiple tangos, flanking north. Harrison didn't slow. Bulldog, sit rep. We're mobile, Bo responded. Preacher's stable, moving to alternate LZ. Roger, Hunter 7 en route, ETA 12 minutes. The first shots came at 6 minutes. Bullets cracked past Elena's head, supersonic rounds that arrived before the sound of the rifles that fired them. She dove behind a boulder, Harrison beside her. The M4 carbine came up to her shoulder. 200 meters, Harrison said. 8 tangos. Moving fast. Elena found the first target through her ACOG scope. A man in traditional dress, carrying an AK-47, running hard across open ground. 200 meters. Wind negligible. Target moving left to right. She led him. Squeezed. The M4 barked. 3-round burst. The man went down. Contact left, Harrison said, already engaging. Elena shifted, found her next target. A fighter using a rock for cover. She waited. He leaned out. She fired. He dropped. 2 down. Moving, Harrison said. Elena followed. They bounded back. One person covers while the other moves. Leapfrog towards safety. More fighters. 10, maybe 12. They'd spread out, trying to flank. Professional tactics. Elena dropped behind a low wall of rocks. Found targets. A fighter at 350 meters. Controlled burst. He stumbled but didn't fall. She fired again. He went down. Another at 280 meters, leading a group of 3, squad leader. She centered the reticle on his chest. Fired. He dropped. The other 2 scattered. 400 meters to LZ, Harrison said, breathing hard. We need to move faster. They ran. Elena's legs felt like concrete. Every breath was fire. But she kept moving because the alternative was dying here. At 200 meters from the landing zone, the Taliban committed everything. 20 fighters, maybe more. A coordinated assault from 3 directions. Automatic weapons fire filled the air. Bullets kicked up rock dust and sparked off stone. Elena and Harrison went prone behind whatever cover they could find. She transitioned to semi-automatic, found targets, fired. 300 meters, 250, each shot counted. A fighter appeared at 200 meters, RPG launcher on his shoulder. "Rocket!" Elena shouted. Harrison was already moving, bullets tracking toward the threat. But the fighter was behind cover, already taking aim. Elena didn't think, she just acted. Her M4 came up. 200 meters, wind maybe 3 miles per hour from the left. The fighter's head was barely visible behind the launcher. She breathed out half, squeezed. The fighter's head snapped back. The RPG fired, but his aim was off. The rocket screamed overhead and detonated 50 meters behind them, close enough to feel the concussion, far enough to survive. "Good shot," Harrison said. They kept firing. Elena lost count. 5, 6, 7, 8. Faces she could see through her optic. Men who'd woken up that morning not knowing it was their last. Men who were trying to kill her. A round caught her left shoulder. The impact spun her sideways. Not a direct hit, grazing shot that burned like a brand. Elena rolled, came up on one knee, kept firing. Adrenaline killed the pain. She was a machine now. See target, shoot target, move. "You're hit," Harrison said. "I'm operational. Can you move?" Yes, the Black Hawk appeared like salvation, a dark shape against pale morning sky, rotors beating the air into submission. It flared hard, touching down with landing gear barely kissing earth. "Go!" Harrison shouted. They ran. The last 200 meters felt like 200 miles. Elena's shoulder screamed now. She could feel blood running down her arm, warm and sticky. Bull appeared from rocks to their left, massive and reassuring. He laid down, covering fire with his M249 SA, belt-fed fury that made the Taliban think twice. Elena reached the bird. Hands grabbed her, pulled her inside. She collapsed against the vibrating hull, gasping, bleeding, alive. Harrison dove in last. "We're up!" The Black Hawk lifted. Bullets pinged off the hull. Distant sounds now, someone else's problem. Elena watched the Hindu Kush fall away below. She'd made the impossible shot. She'd fought her way out. She'd survived. 9 men were dead because Elena Thornton had pulled triggers. The flight to Bagram airfield lasted 47 minutes. Elena sat pressed against the hull, her shoulder throbbing where a combat medic had applied a pressure bandage. Her hands trembled with adrenaline that refused to fade. Harrison sat beside her, his face streaked with dust and dried blood from a grazing wound across his cheek. He'd barely spoken since they loaded onto the helicopter. Now he looked at Elena. Really looked. "Talk to me," he said, voice barely audible over the rotors. Elena stared at her hands. "I killed 9 people today. You completed the mission, saved your team, did what had to be done." Harrison's voice was firm. "You're a warrior, Elena, not a killer. Remember that." Elena closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw Nazari's body jerk from the bullet impact, saw the 8 other men drop during the retreat. "I don't feel like a warrior," she whispered. "I feel like I'm drowning." "Then drown." Harrison's voice held hard-won wisdom. "Let it wash over you. Don't fight it. The ones who fight it, who try to pretend they're fine, they're the ones who break later. Feel everything now. Process it. Then pack it away somewhere safe. You'll carry it forever, but it doesn't have to destroy you." The helicopter banked hard, beginning its descent toward Bagram airfield. Through the open door, Elena could see the sprawling base, acres of tents in buildings in aircraft. Preacher lay strapped to a litter, Doc beside him, monitoring vitals. The injured sniper's face was pale, bloodless, but his chest rose and fell with stubborn regularity. Alive. The Black Hawk touched down hard. Medical personnel swarmed the helicopter before the rotor stopped spinning. They extracted Preacher with professional efficiency, rushing him toward the field hospital while Doc ran alongside. The rest of the team stood on the tarmac, suddenly purposeless, the adrenaline crash hitting like a physical weight. "Debrief in 4 hours," Harrison said. "Get food, get clean, get some rest if you can." The debrief took place in a secure room deep inside Bagram's intelligence section. Windowless, soundproof. The kind of room where classified operations were discussed and uncomfortable truths were filed away. 3 men sat across the table from Elena and Harrison. 2 CIA officers in civilian clothes. 1 Army colonel with a Special Operations Command patch. "Commander Harrison," the colonel said, "walk me through the mission." Harrison's report was crisp, professional, delivered without emotion. He detailed the infiltration, the IED blast, Preacher's injuries, the decision to continue with Elena as primary shooter. He described the shot with technical precision: range, wind, environmental conditions, result. The colonel took notes. The CIA officers exchanged glances. 3,247 meters, one of the CIA officers said. He was younger, maybe 40. "That's beyond the current record by approximately 300 meters. He looked at Elena. "You made this shot." "Yes, sir." "Under combat stress, with hostile forces closing on your position." "Yes, sir." The 3 men exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. "This stays classified," the colonel said finally, "for Miss Thornton's protection and operational security. No official record, no public acknowledgement. Understood?" "Understood," Harrison said. "Understood," Elena echoed. The CIA officer, the older one, with gray at his temples, opened a folder, slid documents across the table. "We recovered intelligence from Nazari's compound, communications, planning documents." He paused. "The 2004 Fallujah ambush was a trap, planned specifically to kill Ghost. He knew, and he went anyway." Elena's world narrowed to the document in front of her. Her father's last radio transmission, preserved in official type. November 12th, 2004, 14:37 hours local time. "Thornton J. It's a choice, sir. My choice. I'm the best shot. I've got the angle. I can take enough of them to give Falcon their window." Thornton J. "Sir, tell my daughter something for me. Tell Elena I'm sorry I won't see her grow up. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her to be better than me, not just like me." Thornton J. "And tell her this was my choice. Nobody's fault, just my choice. Out." The room fell silent. Elena stared at the words until they blurred. Her father's final thoughts before walking into death with eyes open. "He made that choice," Harrison said softly. "Nobody ordered him. He volunteered because that's who Ghost was." "He chose them over me," Elena said, and her voice sounded small. "No." The colonel's tone held surprising gentleness. "He chose to give you a world where 40 families stayed intact, where 40 Marines came home. He chose to be the kind of father who taught his daughter what honor looks like, even if the lesson cost him everything." Elena felt tears burning. She refused them. "Not here." "Is there anything else, sir?" she asked, voice steady through sheer force of will. The colonel exchanged glances with the CIA officers. "Not at this time. You'll be contacted regarding recognition for this operation." He stood. "Dismissed." The debrief concluded with paperwork, signatures on documents she wasn't allowed to read. By the time Elena walked out of the secure room, the Afghan sun was setting, painting the Hindu Kush mountains in shades of orange and red. Harrison walked with her across the base. They didn't speak. Sometimes silence was the only language that fit. At the transient quarters, Harrison paused. "You did good today," he said. "Better than good. Exceptional." "I don't feel exceptional. I feel hollow." "That's normal. First kills always feel that way. He studied her. Your father found his balance in you. You were his proof the world was worth fighting for. Harrison squeezed her shoulder gently, carefully avoiding the wounded one, then walked away. 4 months later, January 2025, Quantico, Virginia. 4 months passed in a blur. Elena watched seasons change, watched the world spin, tried to figure out where she fit in a life that no longer made sense. She'd accepted the instructor position at the Marine Corps Sniper School, 3 days per week, teaching the next generation, passing forward what her father had taught her. Her first training class started on a gray January morning that smelled like rain and new beginnings. 14 students, mix of branches, ages 24 to 38, 2 women, 12 men, all looking at their instructor with curiosity and skepticism. Elena stood at the front of the classroom in instructor's uniform, the Scout sniper tab over her heart, her father's legacy visible. "I'm Elena Thornton," she said. "For 8 weeks, I'll teach you advanced sniper skills. Some of you will pass, some won't. This course isn't about being tough. It's about making impossible shots under impossible conditions." She paused. "Questions?" A hand went up immediately. Army Ranger. Name tape read Callahan. 26, maybe 27. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but you look about 12 years old. What qualifies you to teach this course?" The room tensed. Elena smiled, not the cold smile from the rifle range, something warmer, more human. "Fair question, Sergeant Callahan. I qualified perfect on 1,000-yard standard. I've made shots exceeding 3,000 meters under combat conditions. I've worked with the best snipers this country has produced." She paused. "And I learned from the best teacher possible, my father, Gunnery Sergeant James Thornton, Ghost." The room went silent. Ghost was legendary. "Ghost's daughter," Callahan said quietly. "Ghost's daughter," Elena confirmed. "But I'm not teaching you to be him. I'm teaching you to be better versions of yourselves, to combine old-school fieldcraft with modern technology, to be warriors who think as much as they shoot." She turned to the whiteboard, picked up a marker. "First lesson. The rifle isn't your primary weapon. Your brain is. The rifle is just a very loud pencil for writing corrections." She looked at them. "Let's talk about aiming that pencil correctly." The 8 weeks were grueling. Elena pushed harder than they expected, demanded precision they didn't think possible, made them shoot in rain and wind and darkness. But she also taught them why, explained the math, showed them how to read terrain, how to feel wind instead of calculating it, how to breathe between heartbeats. By course end, all 14 had exceeded their previous records. 10 qualified for advanced schools. 2 got special operations assignments. And Callahan personally thanked her on graduation. "Ma'am, I was wrong. Completely wrong. You're the best instructor I've ever had." "I'm not the best," Elena said. "I'm just carrying forward what was taught to me." In week 3, Harrison visited. He appeared unannounced at the range. At lunch break, he approached with 2 cups of coffee, both terrible, but warm and familiar. "You're a natural teacher," he said. "My father taught me how to teach." He was right. Harrison showed her a tablet with satellite imagery. Syria, compound in the desert. High-value target, 2,900 meters. Desert conditions. Mission briefing Monday if you're interested. Elena studied the image. "I'll be there." "This is different," Harrison said. "I'm offering tactical lead. You'd be calling tactics, making decisions, command." Elena looked up sharply. "You trust me with that?" "You predicted Nazari correctly. You made decisions that saved the mission. Yes, I trust you." Harrison smiled slightly. "Ghost said the best snipers think 5 steps ahead. You think 10. That makes you dangerous in the best way." "Monday briefing," Elena confirmed. That night, Elena sat alone in her apartment, the same small Alexandria apartment where she'd packed 4 months ago. On the table was the wooden box Mitchell had given her, with the job offers. She'd found something else inside, beneath the folders, hidden like a secret. A sealed envelope, yellowed with age, her father's handwriting. For Elena, open when you're a warrior. Mitchell had kept this for 20 years. This was it, his final message. Elena's heart hammered. She'd spent 20 years running from his legacy, 3 weeks proving she could carry it, 4 months learning to balance it. Was she ready? She broke the seal. Inside a single sheet covered in her father's precise handwriting, she began to read. My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. Sorry I won't see you graduate, won't walk you down the aisle, won't meet your children, won't grow old watching you become the woman I know you'll be. But most of all, I'm sorry if you think you have to become me. That's the opposite of what I want. You probably think I wanted you to be a soldier, a sniper, another ghost carrying forward some legacy. You're wrong. I trained you because I saw a gift greater than mine, natural abilities surpassing anything I could teach. I wanted you to have the option to use it if you chose. But Elena, hear me clearly. You don't owe me anything. Not continuation of my career, not vengeance, not becoming a warrior because your father was one. You owe yourself everything. The chance to discover who Elena Thornton is, what she wants, what gives her life meaning beyond impossible shots. The shot you've made, the one that led you to open this, proves you have skill. But skill without purpose is mechanics. I don't want you mechanical. I want you fully, completely, beautifully human. 3 things. First, I died by choice. If I'm gone, it's because I sacrificed myself for something that mattered more than survival. Don't grieve the decision. Honor it by living fully. Second, you are more than my daughter, more than my legacy, more than my skills wrapped in a smaller package. You are Elena Thornton, unique, exceptional, worthy of respect and love, regardless of whether you ever pick up a rifle again. Third, I'm prouder of who you are than what you do. Your kindness matters more than your accuracy. Your character matters more than your kills. Your humanity matters more than your warrior skills. The world will try to define you by your talents. Don't let it. Define yourself by your choices, by the life you build, by the people you love, and the causes you serve, and the version of yourself you see in the mirror. Be better than me, Elena, not just as a shooter, as a human being, as someone who uses violence only when necessary and chooses peace whenever possible, as someone who teaches as much as she fights, as someone who builds as much as she destroys. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, not to the Marines, not to the world, not even to me. You proved everything I needed the first time you smiled at me as a baby. Everything else is footnotes. Live fully, fight when you must, teach always, love deeply, and know that wherever I am, whatever comes after, I'm watching you with pride so profound, it would break me if I wasn't already so completely filled with joy at having been your father. Shoot straight, shoot true, my beautiful daughter. And when you're done shooting, put down the rifle and dance. All my love, forever and always, Dad Ghost. Elena read the letter 3 times, then a 4th. Each reading uncovered new layers, new permissions. Her father hadn't wanted her to become him. He'd wanted her to become herself. And Elena, sitting with tears streaming and a smile breaking through like sunrise through storm, finally understood. She was Elena Thornton, instructor, operator, warrior, teacher, ghost's daughter, and her own person. Capable of impossible shots in choosing not to take them. Strong enough to kill and wise enough to know when killing wasn't the answer. She didn't have to choose between teaching and operating, between peace and war, between being her father's legacy and being herself. She could be all of it, everything, the full, complicated, beautiful reality of a human being who contained multitudes. The next morning, Elena drove to Quantico early. The range was empty, morning fog still burning off. She unpacked her father's TAC-50, set it up on the 1,000-yard line, loaded 3 rounds with careful reverence. The first shot for her father, for Ghost, for the man who'd taught her everything and wanted her to exceed him. The second shot for herself, for Elena, for the woman who'd made impossible shots and learned she was more than her accuracy. The third shot for the future, for whoever she'd become, for all the choices still ahead. 3 shots, 3 perfect hits, 1.8 inches at 1,000 yards. Better than her qualification day. Elena safed the rifle, stood, looked at the Virginia hills rolling away toward horizons she couldn't see. They weren't as dramatic as the Hindu Kush, but they held their own beauty. A vehicle approached, Harrison's truck. He got out, walked over with 2 cups of coffee steaming in cold air. "Practicing?" he asked, handing her a cup. "Remembering," Elena said. "Good memories, the best ones. Monday briefing. I'll have tactical plans ready if you want to review them beforehand." "I want to. This is who I am. Teacher and warrior. Both." She looked at him. "My father wanted me better than him. I think that means being more complete, more human. Choosing when to fight and when to teach. Understanding both are necessary." Harrison smiled. "Ghost would be proud." "I'm proud," Elena said. "And that's enough." They stood in comfortable silence, drinking terrible coffee and watching the sun burn through fog. "Ready to go?" Harrison asked. "Where to?" "Breakfast. Then you have class at 10:00, then Syria mission planning." "The life of a warrior instructor," Harrison said. "The life of Elena Thornton," she corrected. 3 months later, April 2025, Syrian desert. Elena stood on a Syrian ridge at dawn, Harrison spotting beside her. But this time she wasn't just a shooter, she was tactical lead. This was her operation, her planning, her decisions. The mission had gone exactly as she'd planned. Infiltration clean, position perfect, team coordinated. "Wind shifting," Harrison said quietly. "Your call." Elena studied the target compound through her scope. 2,900 meters, desert thermals rising, 3 possible windows for the shot. "We wait," she said. "Target will check the courtyard in 4 minutes. Better angle, stable wind." Harrison didn't question, just nodded. "Your operation." 4 minutes later, the target appeared, exactly where Elena had predicted, exactly when she'd calculated. She took the shot, 2,900 meters, perfect center mass. "Confirmed kill," Harrison said quietly. "You were right about the timing. How'd you know?" Elena safed her rifle, smiled. "I learned from the best, both of them. Harrison and Ghost, old school and new, combined in her. That's what made her exceptional. Not the shots she could make, but the wisdom to know when to make them, and the courage to be fully human in between. The extraction was smooth. No pursuit, no firefight, professional work by professionals. On the flight back to base, Elena looked at her hands. They were steady now, no shaking. The weight she carried had found its place. Not gone, never gone, but balanced. She thought about the letter, about her father's words, about shooting straight and shooting true, and putting down the rifle to dance. She was learning to dance, and the music was her own. Back at Quantico 2 weeks later, the ceremony was small, private, just people who needed to know. 35 veteran snipers assembled in the main classroom, men in their 50s, 60s, 70s, men her father had trained, men who'd fought in Korea and the Cold War, in Desert Storm, in Fallujah, in Kandahar. Command Sergeant Major Everett Palmer stood at the podium. 74 years old, weathered like driftwood, spine that age in combat couldn't bend. 26 years ago, I trained a young Marine named James Thornton, Palmer said. Arrogant, stubborn, gifted beyond measure. I spent 6 months breaking his ego and 2 years teaching him everything about putting bullets through people at impossible distances. Quiet chuckles from the older Marines. Ghost became the best student I ever trained, exceeded my skills by his third deployment, made shots I wouldn't have attempted, saved lives I couldn't have saved. Palmer paused. When he died in Fallujah, I lost proof that the world could produce men like that, heroes who chose honor over survival. Elena felt her throat tighten. 3 weeks ago, Colonel Mitchell told me James Thornton's daughter had made a shot at 3,247 meters. Under combat conditions, under enemy fire, with hostile forces closing. Palmer's voice dropped. I told him that was impossible, that only Ghost could have made that shot, that even Ghost would have called it low percentage. Palmer stepped down from the podium, approached Elena directly. But you made it, against all odds. You made the shot and eliminated a target who'd killed American soldiers for 20 years, including your father. He reached into his uniform jacket, pulled out a small wooden box, worn smooth by handling. Your father gave me this before his last deployment, told me to hold it until his daughter was ready, until she'd proven she was more than his legacy, until she'd become her own legend. Palmer opened the box. Inside, on faded red velvet, lay a small metal tab, worn, scratched, stained with sweat and time and desert sand. Elena recognized it instantly, her father's scout sniper tab. James Thornton wore this for 15 years, Palmer said. Through Iraq, through Afghanistan, through every mission where he put his life on the line. He lifted the tab with gentle reverence. He wanted you to have it, not as inheritance, as recognition that you'd earned the right to carry what it represents. Palmer pinned the tab to Elena's shirt, his ancient hands steady. The metal settled over her heart, and Elena felt something shift inside. Some locked door opening, some weight lifting, some part of her father finally coming home. Welcome to the Brotherhood, daughter of Ghost, Palmer said quietly. You've honored his memory and exceeded his hopes. Palmer stepped back, came to attention, saluted. Then, like a wave spreading through the room, all 35 veteran snipers rose to their feet. They stood at attention, backs straight despite decades of wear, and saluted in unison. The silence was deafening. These men who'd fought in Korea, in the Cold War, in Desert Storm, in Fallujah and Kandahar, they stood as one to honor Ghost's daughter. Palmer's voice rang out. To Ghost, and to his legacy. To Ghost, the room echoed. Applause erupted, not polite, real applause from people who understood what that tab meant, what that shot represented, what it cost to do hard things. Elena couldn't hold the tears anymore. They came like a dam breaking. 20 years of grief and fear and doubt, finally resolving into something sustainable. Palmer hugged her. This ancient warrior pulled her close in an embrace that felt like being wrapped in history. He loved you more than life, Palmer whispered. Never doubt that. The ceremony continued. Harrison told the mission story. Bull admitted his prejudice had almost cost them, said it was shame and respect mixed together. Doc spoke about her refusal of pain medication during extraction, how she'd kept fighting, even wounded. Then the older Marines shared stories about Ghost, stories Elena had never heard, about her father as a young Marine, as a warrior who'd made impossible shots and impossible decisions and remained humble through it all. By the time it concluded, Elena was emotionally exhausted. Mitchell approached. There's more. 3 things. Elena almost laughed. Of course there were 3 things. Job offers. Mitchell pulled out folders. First, instructor position, full-time. $185,000 annually. They want you teaching the next generation. Second folder. Marine Corps consultant, part-time. $160,000. You'd work with active duty Marines, share knowledge, save lives. Third folder. Harrison's company, partnership, equal profit share, $250,000 plus. But it means field work, missions, the life you just lived. I'll take 2, she said. Instructor 3 days per week. Harrison's partnership for select missions, 4 to 6 per year, when it matters. Mitchell smiled. Balance. Balance, Elena agreed. 6 months after that first impossible shot, Elena Thornton had found her place. Not in her father's shadow, not running from his legacy, but standing in her own light, carrying what he'd taught her, building something new. She taught 3 days a week, changed lives, passed forward wisdom. She operated 4 to 6 times a year, made impossible shots, saved lives, did hard things because someone had to, and the rest of the time she lived, fully, completely, beautifully human. She'd made the impossible shot at 3,247 meters, had killed 9 men in one day, had earned the Scout Sniper tab her father wore for 15 years. But her greatest achievement was learning that being extraordinary didn't mean being consumed by violence. It meant having wisdom to choose when violence was necessary, and courage to choose peace whenever possible. Shoot straight, shoot true, and when you're done shooting, put down the rifle and dance. Elena was learning to dance, and the music was everything she'd hoped it would be.